Call the special meeting of August 6th of the Zoning Commission to order. Mike isn't here, so Gavin, would you please set for Mike? Jackie, Tom is the intern in the town manager's office who will contact you about that. I just told Joanne.
Okay.
She said she would let him know, just to make sure.
Okay.
Okay, roll call, we did. Appointments, first order of business is the appointment of Katie Beal to fill the vacancy. Would you make a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion to appoint Katie Beal to the Design Review Board.
As a full member.
As a
Do you
full
know what the
member,
term is?
I believe her term expires the end, January 2019.
Okay.
It's a two-year term.
To fill an unexpired term of Jennifer Merzane,
Okay.
Murnane.
Okay.
who moved to Avon.
Appointment of Katie Beal for Design Review Board for the remaining of Jennifer
Mernane's
Murnane's
Term.
term for a full seat.
Second that.
Thank you.
By Kevin. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It carries 6-0. Thank you. Katie, if you're watching,
Katie's
You're all
awesome. She's an
set.
architect.
okay, good. No, they said she was really a
She's good.
good qualified person. Okay, the next order of business is the only order of business tonight. It's a special meeting and we can't get diverted. So we'll discuss potential zoning regulation amendments and so forth. If we just don't structure this a little bit, it could go on till the summer of 2020. There's a couple of things we could do. I think the subcommittee had reached some sort of temporary agreements on some things. Is that true?
Maybe. We were getting there.
Well, item number one, I remember specifically that Jamie had that nailed down. There was draft language I thought he was done with, that essentially, I couldn't identify exactly which pieces of this his format would have taken into the authority of the, workable authority of the planning director, and not require action by the zoning commission, which is kind of what we're trying to do here
Right.
to make it, to streamline it some as far as, the users go. Mike, do you happen to have a record of what we were what the discussion was on this point? It was the first meeting, and we only had 2 meetings.
Beyond the meeting minutes, no documents were left for us, any draft language. So one of the comments we had is that, if you want to speed up the process on the temporary liquor permits, is have them authorize the zoning officer to sign off on your behalf for just a zoning compliance permit. Maybe, just for the record, Robin Newton, the code compliance zoning officer, you don't really see her that often. We're talking about temporary liquor licenses and possibly a change.
Yep.
Do you have maybe any proposed language?
I just pulled something we had in the last community that I worked in, because we dealt with them a lot for nonprofit type of situations, so I think I made plenty of copies.
I think what Jamie was proposing, if I remember right, was to make a regulation for nonprofit temporary liquor permits that didn't require a special exception,
Right.
and not to make the change that I had suggested. That's what I think. And this, I think what Robin is passing out is along that line.
It is, so basically the way we dealt with it in the last community I worked in is they would originally come in, but not for a special exception, so it was not a public hearing process, it was just like a site plan. They would get it approved through the Planning and Zoning Commission. They limited it up to 4 calendar days per year, but that's just their language. You guys could do whatever, you felt was applicable here. And then once the site's been approved, the zoning officer from that point forward would be able to sign off on those temporary liquor permits instead of it going to the board every single year.
Okay, so
That's great.
for example, what's the one?
Run for the
Rosedale
Roses.
has a bunch.
Rosedale has a bunch of them, but there's the Run for the Roses every year at
Yep.
Folly Farm. And every
Yeah.
time, they've done it 10 years or
Yep.
something. Anyway,
I think
so,
that would be great to put in some language.
since you're doing the drafting of these things, I think if you guys could put that on your list of changes that we could make, if we could make them in the current regs, that would be great, just so we could get something done. And
Do you like
September.
this, or do we want to speak to this specifically? Because this is something we could work with.
well, it has to be fit into the,
Right.
We
can
could
do that.
definitely fit this
Yeah.
into the reg. It's just, you probably want to look at, the 4 calendar days, because I know a lot of our places, especially like Rosedale's, they can have multiple events above and beyond 4. You might not want to limit it. Basically, they come in that first time, they get their site plan approval, and then the site is, quote, approved for, those kind of,
There's a distinction, though. Rosedale's not a nonprofit.
Yeah, they're not nonprofit nor
that is a very
non-commercial.
good distinction. So, again, this is
So that
just.
wouldn't apply.
It would not apply. So that may be something you guys want to talk about is, the Run for the Roses is a nonprofit.
Right, oh, sure, yeah.
Do you want a facility like Rosedale's, which is, a winery that does kind of do this, they come in for the farm to tables events, do you want that type of function to come in for, and it doesn't have to be a special exception. I mean, if you're trying to make it not as cumbersome, then you could do a site plan approval. I think our reg just spells out a special exception, but,
What
you
did they
could
do
also
in the
change
town
that.
where you came from?
For those type of events, so for our farms, they just did site plan approval. So it kind of followed this reg, but it wasn't spelled out that way, so.
The other extreme is the community I came from previously, the town of Waterford. Everything was handled by the zoning officer. Nothing for temporary events was not an application that the commission reviewed. It was just a straight zoning permit and sign off by the zoning officer. So that's the other idea you can have as an approach.
okay, but I think along the lines of our current regs, the idea is that we look at a particular site and decide whether or not serving alcohol on that site is good, bad, or indifferent. If we decide it's okay, then it should be okay, and then you should be able to just get a permit. So this kind of language, I would take out the nonprofit or non-commercial. Rosedale is for-profit, and I don't think we have any issue with those things.
Well, we
And-
had issue with Rosedale wanting to do an excessive amount of events, though, at some point in time.
I don't remember,
Right, and
Well,
that
they
was when they
started with
wanted to
3 or
change
4, and they're up
the
to like
regs for
17.
agriculture.
Right.
And they wanted to change what was the definition of
So that's
activities.
limited in the regulations still.
but that was the bakery, wasn't it?
It
That was a lot
the
of,
bakery, but they
events.
also wanted to morph into the event center.
Yeah,
So they
with
wanted
weddings and all sorts of
events,
things,
like
yeah.
almost like 180 events a year.
Okay.
Would you be okay if we just eliminate not-for-profit or non-commercial organizations and just say temporary liquor permits could be granted by the zoning commission as a zoning permit? Just, the
Yes.
language that was proposed
I
by
like that.
Robin?
Yeah, I like that. I don't know what the limit, whether we should put a limit on it, or,
So
Higher than
Rosedale,
4?
Rosedale had 8 events this year you approved with their temporary liquor. So just food for thought.
but the point is that they still, every time, have to come get a permit from the zoning enforcement officer, and they have to go to the public gathering, food people, and to get,
Police.
and they have to go to the police, and they have to do that anyway to get a temporary liquor permit
With the
from the
state.
state. State requires
I
those
agree.
things. So,
This could be handled administratively. I
Yeah.
totally agree. But
and
we have to agree on that.
whether we're the arbiter of how many they can have a year or not,
So we
I-
could take the days out if, did you want to say something, Bruce?
I was going to suggest that, I don't have a problem with the number of days. If we want to put in a few more days and say 6, so that's a little less likely to be a problem. But I like the idea of letting the zoning, handling it administratively.
Yes.
So they don't have to come back to the commission. And I don't know if you're thinking maybe if they came to the commission one time for each site.
That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking, one time for each site, and we don't limit the days. Let the town zoning enforcement officer, if the town and the police say, hey, come on, you're running this thing 50 times a year, then they'd have to come back to us or something.
So
Right,
we
if they
can-
have a bad event, the police are gonna monitor that.
Yeah.
So we can actually put language in there, and there's, I don't have it with me, but there's language that says, in these type of regs, at the discretion of the zoning officer, the event may be, pushed off basically to the zoning commission for approval. So if they got to the point, so say you had Rosedale Farms came in and they're looking for 40 events in that year, I could say, you know what, that seems a little excessive, let's see what the zoning commission thinks. You're gonna
Sounds
have
good.
to apply to the zoning commission. So we could add that type of language in there, it's been used in other regs, so
That's
we
great.
could certainly put that in there.
It seems common sense.
Do we charge for the zoning permit?
$25.
And would that be for the whole year or per event?
So the one where they're gonna get permission from you guys for site plan amendment would be
$240.
$240, so it'd be a one-time fee, they get their site approved, and then it would be up to them. So if they knew what their dates were gonna be, say for the whole year, and they came in with one administrative zoning permit from me, they could do one $25 fee with all of the dates on there, and we would approve it that way. Otherwise, it would be as they came in with them.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Sounds fine to me.
yeah.
So why don't you guys figure out where to put that, and let's try to find a date, when, probably October is the first time we could have a public hearing.
So what we can do is we can draft language in the current regs and have it ready for you for the next meeting.
Yeah.
So we'll have that application filed. We have some referrals to planning and to CROG that we have to do before the public hearing. So yeah, I think October, maybe the first meeting in October, we can have this for a public hearing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like any other items that you want to lump in that one public hearing. So we don't have to do multiple
Right.
notices.
Okay. So I think we've gotten through that one. The workforce housing zone, what should we say about that? That was the one where we thought that maybe adding that it had to be in a
Yeah,
specific location.
yeah.
Yeah, actually, there was an overlay that
That's-
Jamie came
that's it.
up with that I think was fairly reasonable.
It will only work in certain,
And it had to do with the Hot Meadow mainly.
Had to be on a main street or
Yeah.
or a state
Within
route.
so many feet, and
Yeah, he was talking about we started out talking about 2,000 feet, within 2,000 feet of Hot Meadow. And then they came up with, well, wait a minute, looking at the map and.
It's everywhere.
3,000 feet of Hot Meadow Street.
Okay.
Rather than trying to say,
Yeah.
this zone in, this zone out, to try to improve or change the regulation, rather, the notion was leave the regulation pretty much the way it is, but add that the location has to.
specific location
Specific locations have to
where
be
it was
within
allowed.
3,000 feet of Hot Meadow Street.
But how
That
about the
means they're
idea-
within range of public water, public sewer, and mass transit, for the most part.
yeah, it was a good point.
Yeah, if you make it in the range of public water and public sewer, you're pretty restricting.
Yeah, actually, I couldn't do it without, again, looking at the zoning map, but if you look at what happens when you use that limitation and create that corridor along Route 10, you see that it accomplishes a lot in terms of minimizing,
restricting.
some of the issues.
Robin's getting the map with the tracing on it as we speak.
But,
to
For example,
illustrate that point.
if you look at the south end of town, and you could be talking about all of those streets up to the west off Hot Meadow, which I don't think would be an appropriate location.
Yeah, you're right.
Lincoln Lane and, I mean,
Well, when we first sat down for the conversation, my thought was at least a minimum size, maybe, yes, on the residential, eliminating, placement in residential area, but maybe it's a minimum size for the zone that would potentially, not fit some of the residential neighborhoods, but I'm not sure if we start getting into what's enforceable and what's not. creating limits, but he didn't seem to think so. But Jamie just thought that this distance thing had a better, created more benefits.
Prior to that, Bruce, Jamie had there were only a couple spots that the actual workforce housing would fit.
Right.
Prior to your conversation of how many square feet away. What's the thought?
So this is the based on the tracing from the discussion. This line here, extent, shows 2,000 feet off of Hot Meadow Street. And then the extent goes into, and like Chairman indicated earlier, the south end of town, you'll see it goes pretty far up these neighborhoods.
So that's not going to be good, that's too broad.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things you have to consider is, where are we here? I think 1,000 feet was decided upon for Hoskins Road, Cambridge Crossing.
Right.
The existing, the one approval we have.
Yep.
And how far off is that?
1,000 feet.
That's
in the
1,000?
middle. Yeah, from Hot Meadow Street.
2,000 is a lot.
Exactly, and then three, we don't need to go
But we
that
could do
far.
both. We could say, no residential zones and within 3,000 feet.
Well, that's the
No, if it's
thing.
no residential zone and
Yeah.
within
Yeah, this over here.
2,000 feet, then I think that solves the problem.
So the only thing, just warn you, if
Yeah.
you say no residential,
Yeah.
is that you open yourself up to the possibilities that someone could do an 830G, then an industrial
Yep.
zoning
Yep.
that does not permit residential uses.
Okay.
Because based on your regs, you're saying you allow residential uses in industrial zoning districts. So it's just a warning. It puts it out that there's a recent case out of East Lyme, that East Lyme got burned by their regs because they allow congregate housing in the industrial zoning districts. And the court said,
That's what we did at Cambridge Crossing.
yes,
But would that apply? Are there I zones?
there's still I zones. I zones would be the Potter Forest right now,
Okay.
Herman Drive,
Yep, we know.
Chubb Insurance down in that area.
Okay.
Down CLP property.
North of CLMP. CLMP now is PAD.
Yeah.
Underlying zone is
Yeah.
industrial, but it's PAD.
So zone, making it
It's just a,
non-residential that's
it's just a cautionary note to do
Yeah,
non-residential.
we would
You
want
can
to-
do non-residential, just be aware that should someone challenge you on an 830G application, if they come in an industrial zoning district with a application for an affordable housing project, they will argue that residential uses are allowed in your industrial or commercial zones because of this.
Now, why do we want to restrict it to non-residential? It's residential.
Because if you were living down in your area, for example,
If you were living off of Blue Ridge, would you want something that's workforce housing put in there, which is the density?
If
Would
it's
you-
close to Hot Meadow, you would expect some kind of,
yeah, but close to Hot Meadow is not 2,000 feet.
no, not 2,000,
Right.
but still,
Right.
if you were to back down that number, then I wouldn't have trouble being in a residential area. If you
I
get
think
closer to Hot Meadow.
I think we would see a lot of people come.
Absolutely, yeah. If they're gonna tinker with this and not attack, that was a huge part of all of the vocal,
Yeah.
Right.
people at the meetings that, why is this in a residential neighborhood?
So then you're taking-
28 units and 4 acres, and
But then you're taking
Climax
more
Road.
non-residential property and putting residential on
But
it.
remember, the pressure to do this comes from the legislature. And yes, it's a good thing to do, but
In the right place.
in the right place. And doing something that when we did it and you put it in the residential area, people come running, screaming and hollering that they don't really want it there, then I think we ought to be listening in advance. Say, okay, we can have these type of denser housing, but there are certain areas that have to be along the main street and not in an existing all residential area.
Right.
And we take the risk that somebody is going to go try to put something in one of the industrial properties. But, we've had no success marketing those industrial properties for 30 years now. I mean, it's not like we're shooting ourselves in the foot. What we've done is land bank those things for 30 years because we've prevented any other kind of development of those.
Just a quick question for you guys, in kind of reorganizing the regs, one of the things I noticed is that our other type of like overlay zones or special regs, like cluster development, they require 10 acres, and this one doesn't have an acreage requirement.
I know. I
If you
thought that
added
was a
an acreage
surprise, too.
requirement,
Then you
that
don't
would
have the
definitely cut down on the ability of someone to use this on smaller lots and kind of get that too much density in one area. 10 is what we have in like 3 other regs.
Yep. And that would, like, for example, if you want to compare the two applications that you experienced in the past under this regs, Cambridge Crossing was a 25-acre, 2 parcels, versus the other one, which was 4.
4,
Yeah.
yeah. So that might be a way in and of itself to limit the ability for somebody to use the,
What was the one we did up on, off Plank Hill?
They did a,
Croft Lane? You
There were 4 units.
No, but at
Yeah,
Fire
that's
Town,
how it works.
Sorry, that was
Fire Town.
Sunlight Construction, that was a pad, that was, used to be a professional office, it was a
Yeah.
Yeah.
yellow zone, it was rezoned to pad for the 4 condo units.
Okay, that wasn't workforce housing.
It was one of
No.
the sites we had originally identified, though.
It was originally identified for incentive housing, except Mr. Ferrigno chose to go market rate development instead.
I would think that a 10-acre minimum would solve some of our concerns with where this would land.
So that would trade that for the non-residential requirement.
Correct. Exactly.
So within 1,000 feet of Hot Meadow Street?
Do we have to say that?
you could still have that language if you really want to limit it to a specific area.
Yeah, because I think the whole intention was to limit it to that corridor
Yeah.
where they have all the
say
support.
that.
Yeah,
Yep.
You've got, this.
that way you're not
sewer
gonna have it spotty out in the middle of a neighborhood or
Out in the middle
something. Right, right.
well, maybe it would be helpful if we had, just use that as a standard, if 10 acres and 2,000 feet. And actually look at,
1,000 feet.
Is that okay? 1,000. I think 2,000 is too broad.
well, 1,000's too, 2,000's too broad.
2,000
2,000
is too broad.
yeah.
Oh, I think actually, well, I don't know, I wouldn't have said that, but where I live on Lincoln Lane, there's this, Adams Road is, it's a half a mile up from Route 10, and I'm right on the other side of that, but that's 2,000 feet, and I don't know, I mean, it gives me a way to visualize where 2,000 feet is. The neighbors, in the first 1,000 are going to be no more, they're no different in terms of their interest than the second 1,000.
No, but you're
But-
also going to have less plots of 10 acres. It's both, if you stay within the 1,000. Go ahead.
With our GIS, we could do a map for you and
Yeah,
illustrate
that's-
1,000
yeah,
feet
that would be perfect.
and 2,000 feet,
Yeah, we can
how many
do both.
10-acre parcels
Yeah,
pop up.
perfect.
And it'll give you
That's a good
a good
idea.
visual
Yeah.
representation of how this reg, how do you want to handle Terrafill? Do you want to include Terrafill in this reg or not?
The
Because
distance
I know,
from Hot Meadow
you
Street
have,
takes care of
you're
Terrafill.
focused on Hot Meadow, well, you said Hot Meadow. Do you want to also apply this to
Yeah,
315,
315?
yeah.
315.
And same thing, are there
I mean, it's
10
almost that way
10-acre
anyhow.
plots? Like
Well, yeah,
that
there's,
could
you
apply?
won't find 10 acres plots up there.
No.
Oh,
So
But
then-
just, I'm
so
just
then-
food for thought.
No, but
I
so
don't
then it
mean to-
wouldn't really apply, is what
I
I'm,
don't mean to complicate it, but,
right. But if it doesn't apply,
Yeah.
so it would
Think of
only,
any plots
No.
up there that would be 10 acres.
What about off of 44? It may not be a
You have-
10-acre plot right
One?
now,
You
have
but
one.
you could buy multiple plots
right,
actually, you have a
Yeah.
10-acre plot.
You have one.
in the triangle, don't you?
The corner
but that
behind
would apply.
Best Buy.
It would meet water and sewer and,
Right here.
Yeah, right.
That's
Folks, yeah.
close to 20-acre portion in Canton. And utilities are available if they connect through Canton.
I'd have trouble.
no,
But
I don't have,
I think that, the problem there is you're consuming what could be valuable commercial space.
that parcel's zoned actually residential.
Well, we gotta fix that.
When the access is through Hoffman's storage lot, the car lot, the back of it is.
But it's true, I mean,
The
you've got
Bushy Hill,
something there that's, it's all surrounded by commercial
It's not
stuff. I mean,
access.
We're not changing the whole map. It's just not happening. Sorry, Dave.
All right, so we can look at that then.
Yeah, I think those are good, those two criteria help a lot.
And we can try to get that map for your next meeting, when we have
Okay.
time.
Good.
It should be a fair, simple GIS project.
Okay, the pad zone hasn't really resulted. Did any ideas come up in your subcommittees? Deal with that?
Jamie, his reaction, my recollection was, his reaction is that there are so many facets to opportunities to improve that pad that he felt like it needed its own committee, or words to that effect. But and so we didn't spend
Yeah.
really any time on this, so,
Okay, well, that's fair enough. I mean,
then we'd come back to it, but I guess,
let's defer that from this current discussion then to a future date. I mean, we're gonna have a whole 30 or 40 pages worth of stuff to look at.
well, I guess, as I looked at it, and just the question that you raised here, which is, the overabundance of multifamily units and the underabundance of developed commercial that was expected, that I'd go, well, and maybe, throw this down the road, because the POCD has a goal for the zoning commission in it that calls for the zoning commission to tackle developing concurrency relative to the mixed-use zones. And it has to do with ensuring that when we approve mixed use, that they all get built. And not just, as what I think is a concern, maybe, yes, there's been a lot of apartments, multifamily units approved, but there's, part of that concern in the concurrency thing is that all of those were approved with commercial development that hasn't happened.
Right.
And so,
We've
But the
done
problem
a few
is-
things lately with that, though, where we've
But
required.
the problem is that it's sitting there and they can't get financing to do anything there because it's not
Yeah, I know.
attractive enough. So we're kind of trying to make water run uphill
Yeah.
if we want to force somebody to do something that he loses money on.
well,
Ends
I'm
up
not
as
saying I
wreck.
have the answer, but I mean, the dilemma is,
Yeah.
there's no push to compel development, a proposal that is scaled
Correct.
in a way that they can actually do development, mixed-use development. All we're creating is a zone change for a guy who wants to build apartments.
Right.
Right,
Because that's all the
what-
market will take right now is apartments, that's what they want to build.
But
And we say, okay, call it a pad and you got it, and they'll never
on
build
the
it.
other hand, if you go down and look at the Hartford project, that's a big, complex thing. And I think about it, it has all kinds of different stuff in it, and it's going to be really a nice-looking place. But they had a tremendous amount of difficulty finding anything commercial for the front of that property, remember?
Oh, I remember. I mean, I was watching it on TV, but the thing is that, I'm not sure, are they actually going to execute? They're going to build some things in
They're
the
going to
front of
build,
that
they're
property?
going to build the buildings for commercial occupancy, and they don't have any tenants.
Oh, well, okay.
Well, the problem there is.
It hasn't started yet, though.
Well,
Yeah,
It started.
Mr. Evans got his gas
Yes.
station
There-
down there, Cumberland
there's
Farm.
found-
is a
there's
pad.
I believe they
foundations.
have.
Actually, so the foundations
Yeah.
for commercial aren't in yet, but I
Oh.
actually just talked to
Yeah.
the developer today because he's very close. There's thresholds that were set out, as you guys know, in the commission approval, and they're getting close to the threshold for having to pull the
That's what I
permits
thought,
for.
so there was a certain percentage,
There is.
and at
They're
that
not
point,
quite
we
there
required
yet.
the commercial.
Yep, so, but the
Right.
commercial will have to be built regardless, whether or not they have a tenant, based on the approvals that you guys granted.
And Cambridge did it the other way. They built the commercial first, and it's not leased.
Correct. It's empty.
Oh, yeah.
At where?
Cambridge
Cambridge.
Crossing.
Dorset
Dorset
Crossing.
Crossing.
Dorset Crossing.
Dorset, Cambridge is the other one.
That's hospitals.
Well,
but Dorset got medical offices up there, didn't they?
he's got a
Yeah,
medical
there's
office.
nothing in 'em.
And he's got one that was vacated, that was tenanted and then vacated, so.
Oh, wasn't there a
Didn't face the
Hartford
street.
Hospital or
I don't know.
something?
Yeah.
Didn't face the
But I know, I
street.
see Tony,
St. Francis Care?
what's his name?
And it's gone?
Periodically.
Correct.
He's really moaning the blues. Because he's got a lot of land up there that's already approved for commercial development. It's part of the master plan for the site, and he's been working at it for years. He can't get anybody to.
Yeah, I don't know.
Interested in that
I get
commercial
nervous
space,
when you try to mandate things that, can't be done economically. And what do you end up with? In the end, you end up with properties that are disheveled and unkept and,
But the,
But you can't just put houses
Right,
on everything.
exactly, but the opposing side is only residential will be built, only,
Yeah.
condos, only
well, I
rentals.
think the market takes care of that a little bit. And remember that all the big furor about apartments for the last few years is suddenly dying down when the leasing of those apartments
It's
is
full.
getting more difficult.
Yeah, oh, no.
Finding tenants is not easy for them now, where in the beginning, there was a tremendous built-up demand. Go to New York now, you can get special deals to run an apartment. And we're not in New York, but I think that kind of wave is going to come here, where we've got more apartments than we got people to use them. So
Especially
that'll take
after
care of
300 more get built in Avon Center.
Right.
In the next
And
2
they're
years.
building that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I don't know how we,
Yeah, I think we said we were gonna table the pad, and then we
Yeah.
just went into it, so maybe we'll go
Yeah.
on to the next thing. Thanks, Dave.
let's table that. Signs on town property, I got a lot of pushback from Jamie on this. I asked the question, should the town, Board of Ed, Parks and Recs, and these guys that have various properties around the town have to be coming to the DRB to get approval for the design of signs and for
Well,
the placement
sure.
of signs? Why?
Because they're still in keeping with the town, so you want them to, the signs to still be, with the same standards as any other business.
Like we had the liquor store sign, which was like,
Right, but he's saying these are town buildings.
These are town buildings, and there are,
So, say Simsbury Farms, let's use an
Simsbury
example. A
Farms.
sign on
Okay.
Simsbury Farms, you're saying shouldn't have to go to design review
right.
for approval.
But they have to go to
That's my
zoning
question
for-
is, should it?
What's that?
they have to go to zoning
They have to, if
because,
they want to change their building or add on to it or anything else, they have to go to get a building permit. The building official has to go out and look at it.
But that
Everything else-
particular thing is, there's a state statute, or part of the state statutes, that say the town can one time decide it's not subject to zoning. And if the town selectmen were to vote that, then all this would be gone. They wouldn't have to come to you to build a building.
Oh, right. But-
But they haven't.
Right, and so, I'm with Jackie. I think it's an asset to the town that there's a consistency in the signage. And, there's a later question about internally lit signs. I think, again, try to make exceptions for the use for one group versus any, I think that consistency is a great
The
asset.
library, for example,
I know.
they had a lot of heartburn over the design review board wanted them to put the sign this way instead of that way, I don't know, whatever it was.
But you ended up with a better product. The town is not one of our better applicants all the time. So I think they need to be held to the same standard as everyone else.
I agree. I definitely, like you said, Bruce, it benefits us, I think.
Okay. Let's pass on
Sorry, Dave.
to the next, no, that's fine, let's ask.
No, we're not as tough as, some places like the elite, like Martha's Vineyard and places like that, where the zoning and the requirements are absolute. There's no exceptions for anybody.
Right.
And everybody knows it, and you don't go there if you're not willing to do it. Well, Simsbury's not that bad.
Right.
There's still some flexibility, but consistency is a good thing.
Okay, that was the question. Now, so two of the questions one we've waved off, the other we deferred. The first two we fixed, so good. Accessory apartments. We have Bruce's work here in summarizing,
And something
and
from Mike and.
Robin and Mike
Yeah,
did more details
very much so.
of it.
We've talked about putting a square footage maximum on new.
Cutting down the one we have.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we were almost at like 750 or something.
No, 1,000.
We're 1,000 now, but we
Yeah.
felt like that was
Yeah.
too big.
Yes, I agree.
I thought it might be easier to take these in sort of the sequence Dave's letter lays them out in, which, so the first question is about whether to deal with the requirement that the resident of a, to qualify for a residence to have an accessory dwelling unit, the tenant, the question is, should the tenant be a relative of the owner? And so, I didn't do a wide search. I just was looking at towns around here. And if you look at that handout that Mike copied for me, the first three towns, Farmington, Bloomfield, and Burlington, all have restrictions, so that you have to be, those things to be approved have to have a relative of the owner.
The issue with that, though, is the ones that then get sold and still have the accessory apartment can put anybody they want in it, and then so
No, they
you-
can't. No. It doesn't work
I
like
don't
that.
think
But
you can
just like
say-
ours doesn't work like that.
It becomes very, very difficult.
Who can go
Once,
in it?
once that apartment is established and that transfer
Right.
occurs, for us to start an enforcement, we can start an enforcement action, but it becomes long and difficult process.
Well, one question at a time, that I think in some towns, there's a commitment to a periodic review of the location every 2 years. I know some of these towns had every 2 years, but the question was, can you do it? Can you restrict it to relatives of the owner? And one might say no, but because it's not a good idea, that's another issue. But I thought what Dave was trying to get at, is it legal? Or does it make sense, or is it feasible?
Is it
Is it
sensible
feasible?
to do that, to try to enforce a restriction of that sort?
Yeah.
When, as time changes, a new owner owns it, and they want to use it.
So that's where, I agree. We've talked about this a lot. It's so hard to enforce, to know that a family member, even from day one, it's a family member. So the better things for us to do are what is consistent with keeping with what we want in our neighborhoods. So if you're in a neighborhood and you're adding this type of space, I think we said, limiting the square footage, keeping an internal, it needs to be an internal door. That would mean that it's more or less going to be a family member, and keeping the utilities the same, not giving a separate utility panel. Things like that, I think, is the better way to go.
Right, I agree.
To achieve what?
Well, because we can't require that it's a family member, and we can't keep track,
We could, but we don't want to.
but it's very tough.
I'm not sure.
Because I deal with this. So I think that making our restrictions, like we talked about, square footage, we figure out what's good there. The connecting door is inside the house instead of having an exterior door.
Well, I think you'd
And then-
also want an exterior door.
But there's a reason to, like I said, in our past discussions here, we've said there's the reason being that if it's a family member, there's no issue with that.
Well, you also might
Correct.
have issues,
Well, fire,
Safety-wise.
That's gonna be fire, and that's gonna be their
Yeah.
approvals, but ours would be,
but even, even Jamie said, he wouldn't want his father to have to come through their house all the time. They would want a level of independence and have that separate entrance. But if you did have the connecting door, then you're going to be more likely to rent to people that you're comfortable with.
Yep.
And also utilities,
Yeah.
if you
And then the
require
utilities are
common
shared. So I don't
utilities.
know that I would restrict it to just an internal door.
That's
but,
fine.
Well, I think also you need to weigh a little bit. The POCD also has a recommendation that the zoning commission do something to encourage the ability for people to age in place. Is one of the reasons they want to see an increase in the diversity of housing opportunities. So aging in place, you get the case that was struggled with here on many occasions of the architect out in West Simsbury, who was very plain, right, in his presentations here. All he ever wanted that space was to generate income, so that he could stay in the house.
Which is part of aging in place, is
Right,
your
exactly,
income
right.
goes down.
And so,
Right,
you
which is
don't-
another
you don't-
reason to be able to do this.
right, and I'm not arguing against it. My point is just that you want to be able to let strangers be tenants. And, if you're going to have the door through your main living space,
Yep.
then that sort of discourages that dimension of the people who might be renters, the ones that you're not related to.
But that's what people have been saying, is that and I have to realize, we have probably 4 or 5 people in town that are very loud and vocal, and we have another, however many thousand residents who haven't said anything about this.
Yeah, I know.
So, is the tail wagging the dog a little bit here?
I think, I feel for the residents that do live in neighborhoods, they bought a single-family home, they looked at the 10 homes around them, and they're all single-family homes, and their understanding or their expectation is that those are single-family homes, there's not going to be increased traffic, there's not going to be a different element. And again, we're not talking about having family there or not having family there, we're just talking about limiting, adding some requirements, and I think that's perfectly feasible. It would
Yeah.
appeal to a tenant or to a family member. It would still apply.
Do you still want to allow them in detached accessory structures? Because your regs currently allow them in existing detached accessory
I would
structures.
say no.
That's not a common
No.
feature.
But
Yeah.
why wouldn't you want to?
For the same reason, because it would more likely not be a family member, it would be more people, it would be more of a tenant with other cars, and
One of the
that's not-
towns here does something like that with, they distinguish it on lot size. So you have
I
to
saw
have a big parcel to be able to do that separate structure thing.
Granby, lots less than 2 acres, it must be inside.
Yeah. You might say, well, it's a
But
fact.
like the case down in the, whatever that street was down in Weetalk, the guy had 8 acres,
Oh, Nod Brook,
and,
about Duguay's neighbor.
and it was a crazy
Since both sold
situation.
their houses and have moved out of town.
Yeah.
Both Duguay and the other guy who was still in the garage and wanted to have the third
Is
story
that
thing.
why he's not here
They,
anymore?
yeah, they
Yep.
both moved.
Dugay moved?
Yeah, just last week.
Really?
Yeah.
He's still sending things.
I know, he still has an opinion.
So keeping this on track, so we could say a minimum lot size, that would appeal to that kind of a thing. And so if they have a bigger lot, focus Dave. If they have a bigger lot, then it wouldn't probably bother the neighbors as much, like you're saying, that having that detached dwelling.
That was Granby?
Granby.
There's also a minimal on Farmington, minimal lot size, 5,000 square feet with one, the additional unit being this. The special permit process, for the lot size, minimum 12,000 square feet. I mean, we can come up with something.
I had a reg in Waterford that we called it the caretaker residence, and it was, I believe, 12 acres was required in order to establish it. So if you had the family compound,
Yeah.
and mom and dad or a child wanted to live independent, one, you establish that you have more than 12 acres, and then you could apply, it would be an ADU that in a detached accessory dwelling.
Yeah.
Except for I can get a granny pod in my house and put it in the middle of my backyard and I can be perfectly legal. So,
Without coming to the commission.
without coming to the commission. And it's gonna look like, you know what?
Yep.
So why wouldn't we want to allow someone,
Not saying that we wouldn't allow, we're just gonna.
well, if you're limiting it to, I don't have that much square footage, but I can put a
Right.
granny pod in the middle of mine.
Right.
In the example of the granny pod, under statute, you have to demonstrate certain criteria for the need. So it's for reasonable accommodations. So there's a whole, you're either your caretaker.
And that
or
one
it's
is
the-
restricted
Yeah,
to
yeah,
a
it does
caretaker.
disappear.
And that's
or-
why,
Yeah.
so that law is now in effect. We have yet to hear anyone in this town come in and even request information on applying for
They
a
don't know
granny.
about it.
Well, word's out. It's actually out
Been
amongst
pretty well
people.
advertised, yeah.
And we're one of the few communities, a lot of communities prohibit it. We did not. And
Yeah.
it was more of to wait and react rather than just to quickly say
Right,
no.
right.
Because the law could change really quick, and we may want to keep that.
That's not a good, I'm just throwing it out there, that's not a good comparison anyway, because even though you could do it on your minimum lots, we talked about this, septic, sewer, you know what I mean? There's other limitations that we have in town, where those granny pots just couldn't go, because you can't hook up, you can't extend the sewer or septic that much.
You
So-
can't put it on top of your leaching field.
Well, all of it, but you also can't keep making them bigger and bigger systems, it's just, so all of that would have to get approved, is what I'm saying.
Is it considered a bedroom?
The granny pod? Yeah, it's defined as
Because
a...
if it's
as a-
not, then you
Well-
don't need to upgrade your septic.
No, it does go, it needs approval from either your
Health
home district
district
or
or
the sewer
utility.
department.
Yeah,
Right, but I'm saying if it's not a bedroom, then it's not gonna affect your,
It is.
They're not, yeah,
That was the
Farmington Valley
presentation.
is
That
not
was,
gonna approve
yeah,
that.
then...
It is.
So,
Yeah.
and that's what gets complicated, because DPH has kind of issued a memorandum to local
Yeah.
health districts saying they don't have the authority to sign off on these things, that those applications actually have to go to the state, because they're considering it two residents hooking up to one system, meaning the septic system is considered a community system then,
System, yep.
which is a whole different, that's
Yeah,
a longer
right.
conversation.
okay.
So what do we think about,
Well, it's just, and the other scenario, or the other picture here is that Avon doesn't allow the separate structure, but their language speaks to add on to your house. They put a limit of a 10% increase in the size of the house. to
Well, that's gonna
accommodate the
limit
ADU.
most of the houses.
Yeah.
That means you can only add on 200 square feet, which is
Yeah.
not sufficient room for any
Well,
kind of
there's already
accessory
some
dwelling.
room, but you look at what they do allow, 400 and 600. There's, you might say, well, I'm never moving to Avon because they don't allow ADUs that I might need. Well, their ADUs are as small as any town here.
Yeah,
It's
but,
not, it has nothing to do with the size of the houses or the affluence of the community. I mean, I don't know who came up with these standards. Hiram Peck is over there these days. I don't know if he felt ours were too large and he recommended something smaller over there, but anyway.
well, if you do limit it to 10% of the house, though, it does have to do with how big your house is. Because you can't get a big enough.
No, it has to do
It's
with
25%
not
of the
changing the outside of the house and impacting the visual for your neighbors and all that other stuff. The idea is to keep the outside of the house consistent. And all you are doing with an ADU is increasing potentially some traffic, in and out. But if the exterior of the house, you see, some of these towns don't allow exterior staircases, so you can't add a staircase to facilitate a second floor ADU. If you can't get up there some other way internally, you can't go upstairs, so.
To Bruce's point, the previous community I worked for, Waterford's regs, at least while I was there, prohibited external connections. You had to have a common hall, a mudroom, or some way
Your
to,
stair.
between each unit. They also limited it to 600 square feet while I was there. Didn't have a rental issue
And that's what
under those.
you and Jamie had said, about 600 square feet was a pretty reasonable,
And even if you look at a lot of the regs that both myself and Bruce
Yep.
provided you, a lot of them are between 600 and, 900 is the most. We actually, are the most generous out of the group.
well, we
I
were
don't
at
remember
600, and we decided to increase it to 1,000.
Did somebody complain about the 1,000? I don't remember that.
Yeah.
That our limit's too low? Is that why
I
it
think
comes
it's
up?
high.
It does look on the generous side, but what's a few hundred square feet among friends?
Another bedroom.
Well, that's true.
Non-family member.
But it's 30% of the house size.
Yeah.
Or 1,000 feet, whichever's less.
It's the lesser of, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But
So
I
I
think we
would
were all
say
comfortable
60.
chopping that a little
Sorry?
bit.
Yeah,
Your current regs read 60
60%?
yeah.
for 1,000.
Dave,
Yeah.
Well, we changed it.
so I
No.
think the lesser 600 square feet or 25% of the houses is reasonable. 10%, like you said, that's too small.
Yeah.
For most people.
It's the way that reg reads the 10% is that if you're doing the addition can only be 10%. So what happens if you're converting, let's say, existing garage space?
Exactly.
So that 10% could be just a
Not
room that you're
anything.
adding.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
just,
Yeah. No,
but
that
it's
doesn't
still,
help.
it's still.
That doesn't help most
It should be,
Or you do the addition first and then you come in for the approval.
Well, no.
You're only limited if you do it as.
No, it's actually, Kevin, they measure backwards, they give you a date. The reg says, the measurement is like 5 years ago, 5 years from, back from the date they applied for the permit, something like that.
Bruce is correct.
Yeah.
And if it's in a house that's less than 5-year-old, you'd measure based on the date of first certificate of occupancy was issued. So if you built your new house, you added your addition and thought mom and dad are moving in, 2 years later apply for your accessory dwelling unit approval, and you exceeded that 10% with the addition, you wouldn't qualify for that reg. You'd have to wait basically 3 more years.
Well, wait a minute, we said, I thought what I heard is that we were concerned about general rentals and trying to restrict it to families in real need, if you will. And that having things like no external door, shared utilities,
Donna's saying that
shared
having an
utilities.
internal door would be a better one than saying no external door.
Okay.
Having an internal door means that
They
you
have to have it.
connectivity.
And that 600 feet
Yep.
is
Or
probably
25% of
25%, that's
the dwelling.
whichever is larger.
No, whichever is.
I would say lesser,
The
Lesser.
yeah.
Oh, okay, so it could only be 400 on a 2,000-foot house, okay. Those are the things that I thought we had agreed on would be sufficiently restrictive to control the rental.
Yeah, we just
of
don't have
things.
anything in our,
Yeah.
But
But
then
I'm
we got the
agreeing
other
with-
flip side of that, which is Bruce's point that Schoenhart wanted to rent it.
And the POCD wants us to facilitate that with our regulations.
Pardon?
And the POCD wants us to facilitate
to
that with
facilitate.
regulatory changes.
That kind of thing, so people could
Yeah.
rent out part of their house and
Right.
live on the proceeds. And that's really a separate problem.
correct. I think
But
this is just
one
saying that
regulation.
Yeah, it really
if
is.
what we currently have coming into us, if it's not family, this is just limiting it to not 5 people renting it or something like that. So it will help facilitate renting as well as,
Help control renting.
yep, well,
Yeah,
yeah,
you-
but also if everybody says they're bringing family members in, like you said, aging in place. So
And you
all
could
these-
age in place by living in the 25% and renting the 75%. Doesn't say which
Oh, right,
percentage you have to live
right,
in.
Yeah, right.
And that's kind of what he wanted to do.
But he wanted to have his bigger space.
No, he was taking smaller space.
So I
Yeah,
would
but he
say what
wanted
he
a
said,
bigger space than he would
Oh,
be
then
allowed.
25%.
and add the shared utilities, and add limiting the lot size to something we have to figure out if it was gonna be a detached.
For detached unit, it's gotta be, Granby says 2 acres, right?
That's open land in Simsbury. I think that would be fine.
Pardon?
That's a lot of land in Simsbury. I mean, I think 2 acres. you
So if
could-
it's less than 2, it would have to be part of the primary.
Not the, part of the house.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
In the end, you're not gonna have
Well,
an apartment
yeah.
complex on the residential. I mean, you're talking 1 or 2 more people, which you could easily have had that much traffic if you had 3 kids and they all had a car. And they had friends coming over all the time,
Yep.
you know?
But also
So,
the 2 acres-
in the end, it's,
Hopefully gives you parking and all the things that we've heard, all of that is contained, hopefully, in the 2 acres. It's in the driveway, it's not for everybody to see. So that's,
But a minor point, but I think in our case, the expression we'd be wanting to use is R80, an R80 zone. You have to be something bigger than that. Because technically, R80 is not 2 acres.
No, under the regs, your R80 actually says 2 acres.
good.
It doesn't call it 80,000 square feet like the R40, which is.
Okay, I thought I saw
But
that.
the only thing is, to maybe
Yeah, okay.
piggyback on that comment, is that the majority of the town is zoned R40. So you have properties that are in the R40 zoning district that have in excess of 2 acres. So do you want to say 2 acres, period, or do you want to just limit it to
Well,
R80 or greater?
And at 2 what are we saying, at 2 acres, you could have a
detached.
A detached unit. So then go back to that Nodbrook example, because that's a good example. There's R40 zoning district.
Yep.
And he had
And
what?
much smaller lots
he
right
had-
next to it.
He had 8 or 9 acres over
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
so he exceeds the
I would
2
say
acres.
2 acres, yeah.
The site could support the density of the development, I mean, he could subdivide it for all,
But our current,
undercurrent.
and his issue was the current calls for an existing, you gotta be working on an existing building.
Right.
And his
Yeah,
proposal was to knock it down and build himself a new one.
Yeah, he still wouldn't qualify, right?
I think if we limited it to R80, we're really limiting it, is what I think.
Yeah.
Right, so if we limit it to 2 acres.
Do you want to get rid of the provision for existing accessory structures and just say that, you know,
Yeah.
here's the criteria, you qualify for 2 acres?
Yep.
Okay.
Now, would the detached have the same guidelines as the attached, size-wise?
It's a good question.
Why wouldn't it?
Yeah, you could say that, you.
I mean, I think we would
meets-
have to be certain that you would
So
give
do you wanna-
guidelines for the detached as well as the,
Do you want to set it up similar to, if you look at Canton's reg, where they say you have an attached accessory dwelling, you have a detached. So basically, we'll just mirror the design standards into the detached from the attached. I'm sorry, not to overcomplicate it, but then it's clearly spelled out for someone, you know, you're limited between 400, 600 square feet for the living space of this detached unit.
Well, I should point out too, just as a matter of edification here, that until you've read some of these regulations, you have no idea how out of step we are. Our regulation is what, 8 pages long, 10 pages? Most of these are a paragraph, have 3/4 of a page, that's it. And
But-
ours is page after page
But
after
like
page. after
Mike and Jamie had
And
said,
we-
you're right, they've never really been cleaned. It's always been just added on to. Anytime something's come up, it's been, let's add this in, right? So we're cleaning it up.
Well, I don't
Well,
hear
the
us
section
moving in
we
that
actually
direction, I
added-
just hear of changes, I don't hear any compression going on.
Well, I think that's what we're getting to, and we're gonna be able to review that.
The strategy in other
compressing.
towns is they leave more to the judgment of look at the proposal and see if the design is consistent with the neighborhood and the other houses around
That
it, you know,
has
that
not
sort of
worked.
thing.
Yeah, we can't, nope.
Nope,
Gross.
No, I'm not
We're
suggesting
compressing, we're compressing.
we should go there, but that's a key distinction.
We can look at the regs and look at the repetition in your existing regulations to set up, because you have design criteria, and then you have criteria for granting a decision, and maybe see what can stay, what can go, because you say a lot of the same things.
Yes,
and some of those things that are just opinion, that we've gotten
Yeah.
us into trouble.
Yeah.
Like effects, that is not, you can't really quantify, like you
Keeping
can't
with the
say,
character of the neighborhood.
that's just asking people to come and
Correct.
duke it out in front of
Well,
us.
here's just food for thought. Do you want to keep this as a use that's specially accepted, or would you rather it seen handled either like a site plan approval or a use as of right, where they just get a building permit or zoning permit? I'm not advocating for any of those. I'm just putting it out there.
I mean, if they meet all the design requirements, why would we even wanna,
And there's no restriction on the tenants.
why would we even need to
What are
see
we
it?
doing?
you're saying take it out of special exception. Donna.
We would make television here less exciting.
I know.
That's for
Which I'm totally down with.
sure. Yeah. If
Maybe we could just
specify-
look back at the process in these towns.
If we
Like, I didn't
specify
pay
these
much
things,
attention to
then
that.
like
If
you
if
said,
you have
Is it
very
a special
specific
exception in
guidelines, then
every one of these
we want to
towns?
really get out of the changes this or might cause extra traffic. All those things that,
right,
If we made it a site plan approval, then it would have to appear on our docket, on our agenda, and people could write letters expressing
No
their
public hearing.
opinions. Without having public audience and all that crazy stuff. But they could express their opinions, and it could be read into the record.
Correct.
And we could discuss it when we're making our decision, that there are 6 people who've said they're adjacent, and they don't like it.
but there's no decision that can be made based on those
Yeah,
letters because you're going to have very specific guidelines.
so to Donna's point, if you handle it as a site plan approval and they demonstrate compliance to those design standards,
You're done.
you're obligated
Yeah.
to approve them.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
I think that's good.
So
So I think,
that's the only,
We take it out of
it's a
the special
cautionary.
exception.
It's that if you want to go down the road of either site plan approval or zoning permit, you really take out that discretionary review.
but I think people, to some extent, want us to make some decisions and not just create a formula that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't.
Well, then you step back and you look at the big formula that says that anybody who owns a house in Simsbury can rent it to anybody they want to.
And not be there.
And they don't have to
Yeah.
live there. They
To as
don't ever
many
have to go
people.
visit or look at it.
Right.
Well,
That's the
Unless
big
the family is
picture.
bigger,
And then you
right?
get down to the little things and it's arm wrestling.
Yeah.
But we do have the ones occasionally, like the folks with their lot that were here just at our last meeting, and their lot is off of West Mountain Road. And they can't possibly see their neighbors from their house. And it backs up to the Canton Town line. No one sees them, they don't see anybody else, and they're doing an internal ADU. We've had a couple of others like that too, that have the wide open spaces, and you don't get anybody complaining. I
Right.
know the woman, you probably remember the woman that owns that, I think they sold it already. There's that house on Old Farms Road that used to be a cow barn. It was a dairy barn.
Oh, yeah.
And it's red, right on.
Dunny's,
Dunny Barney's
Dunny
owned it
converted
at
it.
one time, right?
Yeah.
But somebody converted it to an
Dunny.
ADU and didn't get a permit too. And then when the
they
woman
came
sold
in,
it,
Right.
the real estate agent told the buyer, there's a accessory dwelling thing up here that if you want to use it for that, you need to go down to the town and apply. And she came down and she went through the process and she said that she had no real need for it, but she didn't want to miss the opportunity, so we approved it. And she had a neighbor come in, I think, or wrote a letter who said, I think somebody across the street was said, fine, you can't tell. There's enough parking and enough space over there and the building's odd enough anyway that.
Right.
So they're not, they haven't always been a
Too, on
bad.
those lots. Again, there's a big difference between some of these lots, some of these neighborhoods and things that have come in where you see your neighbors every day and you see everything, so.
Do you want us to draft maybe that the changes for the design for attached and detached, and then maybe look at how other towns are handling it for approval process, and we can continue that
Yeah.
conversation?
Yeah.
Rather than commit to anything
Yeah.
tonight,
That'd be great.
we will do that.
One
Try to
other
get that
thing
for
I
the
was
next meeting.
thinking of is that you didn't get it when, did you extract from the Burlington one?
No, I didn't. I didn't know you were we should have shared notes on which communities
Burlington
we're looking at.
begins their ADU section with a statement about why they do this. And I thought when I was reading it, I would expand on it a little bit, but that might be a good thing for us, even though it's not consistent with all of our regulations, to put in, why does the zoning regulations believe this is the right thing for the town? But you put in a statement like that and just leave it as a done deal kind of a thing, to get it out of the public hearing realm and into the
yeah.
site plan type,
Bloomfield and East Granby do the same.
with some sort of a statement as to why?
There's a purpose section in their regs.
Yeah. Oh, and a lot of them are just the ADU thing.
ADU. Well, I was looking at ADUs.
Yeah, yeah. So,
But I can look at that too.
yeah, Burlington, that's the one I noticed. And it just seems to fit our situation, especially if we want to move the regulatory process away from the public hearing feature to one that, recognizes it as,
Part of housing.
yeah.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that direction, trying to move it into a site plan approval. Jackie?
Yeah,
Okay, so you will draft something?
Yep.
So the next meeting, would we be able to decide on that or adjust it to something that we could then go forward with?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we have enough time for your next meeting, because your next meeting is until September 17th.
No, we're gonna have another special.
We got another special meeting
Go on
in
a
2
special,
weeks.
oh, wait, I forgot, we've scheduled two. We have 2
Yeah.
weeks from now.
Mhm.
We can get it. We can get it in 2 weeks.
Man,
It'll be a
these guys are
priority.
tough.
Do we wanna talk about Airbnb tonight too?
Pardon?
Do we wanna do Airbnb tonight or no?
The next thing I
Yes. So just to follow up, your next meeting will be August 20th. So we'll have these revisions we discussed earlier ready for you at the August 20th meeting.
okay.
Sorry.
The other thing was that there's a new draft of the zoning regulations. Is this the same one you gave me, or?
No, we took the comments on getting a table of contents and just a date on the front so you know what
Yeah.
revision this is. So the table of contents is based on it's setup only. There's no substantive change on meat of the regs.
Okay,
So the thing that was put into Dropbox,
Yeah,
Yes.
That is the same. This is just added with a table of contents, so you could kind of.
this is the same as that one. How does that relate to the thing that has been announced twice already this year as, this is the new Simsbury zoning regulation? It's been twice. Yeah, once in
We
like
don't
February or
know.
March. And
Oh, are you talking about when we so those are included?
when I look at the town website,
Yeah.
I
So
go
whenever,
to a
whenever a new
zoning
document is
regulation.
uploaded, so for example, last one was done in April, it was received in the town clerk's office, April 25th, 2018. That update incorporated the changes to the floodplain regulations that the commission just adopted. So every time either the commission or someone changes the regs, if you subscribe to the news on the town website, a new document's uploaded, you'll get an email and say, hey, new zoning regulations are up. But it's really, it's the revised document.
Yeah, okay, I got that part, but what I'm trying to get at is, I have something on my PC at home, which is the download I did 2 months ago of the town zoning regulations off the town website. And I'm trying to find out if the thing that you just handed out, or it's in Dropbox, how does that relate to the thing that's on the website right now, the town website?
So the one that's on the town website is your current regulations.
Yeah.
This is this in Dropbox, and what's in front of you is a working draft.
Right, but is the text of the regulations, are they different? Or is
What
it
we
just
did
the
was,
format?
and Robin can speak to, because she did a bulk of the work on this. What we did was we took your existing regs, so the one that's on the town website, and we started grouping like terms with like, and just reorganizing so there was a different flow to the document in order to ease the reader the ability to find, like, I'm looking at a property that's zoned residential. What can I do with this property?
I'm
What are the
not trying to
uses?
make this harder.
No. I'm
You're
sorry.
I'm just want to be clear that there's no change in text proposed in the document that you're distributing now. You've reformatted it for a
It's
variety of good
reformatted.
reasons.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's reformatted, and the only thing that has changed that was
Sorry.
included in, is if you go to, it's easier if you just look at the table of contents. The two things that are missing from ours, that we just added drafts in, are the site plan and special exception submittal requirements. Those are new sections, and they're just draft wording for you guys to kind of go through and say, yep, we like this, or no, we don't. Other than that, it's our regulations reformatted in a more user-friendly manner, so all your residential is together, all your business is together, all your industrial is together, so you're not flipping through 4 different articles of the regs trying to find what you need.
and signs,
what,
I'm sorry, signs, is that all together?
It's all the same,
All
yes,
together.
signs, it's its
Because that
own
was,
section,
that was
yes.
something that,
Yes, parking is
yeah,
its
it
own
was scattered,
section,
yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
What did he
what
do?
what
This is
about
not
the things
rewritten
that,
at
Done, I'm not
Planimetrics
exaggerating. The
did.
town has spent in the last dozen
Glenn.
years, we've probably spent
Glenn Chelder,
This is not what Glenn did.
Okay.
what happened to that?
Result is pitiful.
We have that from like a year and a half ago,
About that.
2 years ago, and
then
to be
they-
honest
well,
with
we
you,
had
we
to
haven't been
redo most of it.
included in any of
Why didn't we
the
just do that?
regulation
I don't understand what we
discussion
did.
or updated.
I don't know.
We haven't seen any updated documents based on Glenn's, so we just kind of took it upon ourselves to try to come up with something so that we have a workable document.
Okay, but you're familiar with what he did,
Oh, yeah.
so that,
Yeah, we saw that with the
We're familiar of original draft.
With the
of what he
original
did.
draft,
We're-
yeah.
okay. I thought what we should do tonight is to look at the outline and see if the overall framework is something that we think is a good one, and discuss that, the approach, and then I think the completion of the editing of the text throughout it, I think there's a lot of work that has to be done. I mean, I started reading the text, and I found a lot of places where there were redundancies, where the same thing was said in 3 different places, and it would be good to thin those out and edit them. That you weren't trying to do in this work.
There was no editing. This is strictly a cut and a paste from our current document just to make it more user-friendly. So, I mean, even as a zoning officer, I can tell you that when I go through the regs, I will never answer someone immediately, because it might say something in one section, but once I go to another section, it says something completely different, and then even more so, I can go to another section, it says something else. So this was more to get everything in one area. So again, all the residential in one area, so you're not flipping through 3 different articles to find it. All the business in one area, all the industrial in one area, pulling the signs out because they were kind of hiding in there, giving them their own sections, giving your parking regulations their own section, which they should have. It makes it easier for someone who's looking for that to go through. So it was really just a reorganization. And like I said, Mike did send over to include in the site plan and special exception submittal requirements, because I think it's something you guys have been talking about in the past and was on the list to work on. So that is new. But it was really just kind of pulling them out and creating their own headings to make it easier to find.
I'm just confused a little. What did our consultant do with these the whole time he was?
This isn't his work, this is their work.
Right. Okay. So this has nothing to do with what he did?
Right, that's what they
And we're
just
just
said.
going to be like, okay, smashing them together? Or-
Well, we're going to, once we agree that this outline is good,
Okay.
then we can look at it paragraph, section by section, and
Okay.
work on the text, cleaning that up, which they can do to start
With
with.
comments, yeah.
And then we
Ideas
can
from us. All right.
come back to them and go through it section by section.
Yeah, both of us have done this work in the previous communities we worked for.
Yeah.
So this is totally something, a project we could do in-house, and
Right, well, that's
we
why I
honestly would like to do an
kind of
aggressive
wondering.
schedule on this and have this done by the end of the calendar year.
Yeah, because it was,
So, because we don't want to, we're as frustrated as you, we don't want this lingering any
right,
longer.
okay.
So,
So we'll have a public hearing on Christmas, right?
right.
We'll be there. Just you.
But I think that, I'm hoping, although I wasn't there in the room, that we hired a consultant to review our regulations, and one of the chief goals would have been to ensure that our regulations represent contemporary practice. Contemporary practice, not just the way we always did it. And if you look around, you don't find any other towns that do it like we do it. No, we want to get away from that.
He identified some sections that don't apply, right?
Yeah.
Never applied, so he was able to pull those out.
Good, that's what
Yeah.
we want them for. Now,
Yeah.
in
For
addition
example-
to organize it better, that's a great thing.
The whole business with these design districts, I think that they were all of those cluster development, I think those all appeared because somebody wanted to develop a certain part.
Certain area, right.
And these all were created to fit that, and since then, nobody's ever done it again. So we ought to look at those things and see whether or not
Yeah,
we
They
ought to
still
keep
apply.
those.
good point.
What's the place off Bushy Hill?
Powder Forest Homes?
No, over here in the corner, West Street. And
That was done by Ensign Bickford.
Yeah.
No, on the other side on the west side
Stratton.
of Bushy Hill,
Stratton Forest Homes?
Stratton Forest. I think that was, one of
really?
these
Oh, I didn't know that.
was created to create Stratton Forest.
Pro-
And I'll bet it hasn't been used since.
Right.
So,
But again, if we don't need the wording, cluster, you're absolutely right. If it fits under a PAD or something else, we don't need it.
we don't need it.
Right.
We-
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
So
you're right.
simplify.
So maybe we need to get Jimmy Gallagher back in here.
Yeah.
But there's some of these things that I look at and I say, oh,
Yeah, we haven't
that fits
identified,
over there.
correct. Yeah,
And
we haven't
nowhere else.
identified with it in years.
It's almost like gross spot zoning.
What were the two that they inserted?
But
that's kinda what the
Like,
pad
just put
does.
in- There's
Yep,
only two of
that
these
is.
that they pulled out of.
So what do we think about,
Uh,
do we agree that the outline and the objective here is
Applying for
something they
site.
should continue to work on?
Oh, definitely, I think it's great.
So let me see.
Yeah.
We might take some sections out, but that's all good,
That's
right?
fine, like I said, this was just a
Submittal
reorganization, and if you look, there's no
115.
cross-references in there yet, so you'll see a lot of like section X,
So these two
X, X.
sections.
Because we didn't want to go too far in and you guys go, you know what, we really don't like this setup, go back to the old
Take it
one,
out.
you know, take take it back. So this was just more of a flow to the regulations. If you guys like this flow, then we'll start going back and
Which was
doing the
the-
cross-references, and then we
Both
can
of
work
them.
through what you
Yeah.
guys think you want to take out and what's
See, when I think of a
duplicated
draft
and what
document,
can
I'm
stay
thinking all
in.
about
I think
the
it's
text.
very resident friendly. I really do,
I
or
know,
builder
'cause the
friendly,
text is
either or,
Yeah,
because it's
Right, exactly.
very
That's where
specific.
the deep.
This is a good outline. And like Bruce said, we can compress and compress and compress.
I like it, get the red pen out.
Yeah.
Okay, any more comments? Are we through?
Oh, I don't know if you wanted to do Airbnb.
Oh, we want to discuss Airbnb. Let's take a few minutes.
Just maybe
Talk
get it
about that.
started.
In general, there've been, I think some people were complaining, residents were complaining that Airbnb activities were being done in their area and they didn't like it. We have a situation where I think maybe all of us have used Airbnb in various places. And somehow, it seems to be a good thing to move forward in this world. So what are the things we need to worry about if we're to let it exist in Simsbury,
Freestanding hotel.
the freestanding
Like,
hotel?
I think again, that maybe the owner needs to be on site.
On site? But a lot of places that I've used as B&Bs or Airbnb, I mean, the B&Bs were in existence a long time before Airbnb, and there were even directories. You could go to Chicago in 1993 and find places where you could get a listing of B&Bs, and you call the people and you reserve a, so it was kind of like renting the apartment. But in, what's the round building on the lake in Chicago? There's two Twin Towers. They've been there since the 40s. They're like the Capitol Records building in LA, except they're round, big towers. And I rented an apartment there, and the guy moved out for the weekend that I need, or the show that I wanted to go there for. And then I guess he moved back in, but it was really spare, so I'm not so sure he ever really lived there.
Right, right.
So it could have been going on that people were just renting, bought those apartments or
But I
sublet
think the
them.
concern for people is this is not Chicago, or this is not, Italy, where you've been, or where I've been is Boulder, Colorado.
Montreal.
Yeah, this is not that. This is a smaller community. So I understand that concern.
But you don't have anybody on site regulating
Correct.
activities or anything, at least in an apartment building. You got somebody above you or below you that's gonna call somebody and say, hey, he's having a big old party.
Yeah, but generally it wasn't parties, it was people just
Yeah,
renting
I'm
it.
just-
like a hotel
Yeah,
thing.
right, but I'm just saying, in case something bad,
But what,
Have you seen anything with other towns, or?
So there's only one community in Connecticut that regulates Airbnb, and it's Hartford. And Hartford has a very, very extensive regulation for Airbnbs. They limit the number of occupants, they limit the number of days you can rent the unit.
Like over the course of the year, you can
Or
only
per
rent it
calendar
out
year, yeah.
30 days or
Let's say like
whatever.
100 days. You couldn't go more than half a year renting.
So you have to apply to allow this.
They handle it by a zoning permit, so the zoning officer signs off on it with the ability, should the zoning officer determine a reason that he or she does not agree with issuing the permit, they can forward it to the zoning commission, or city zoning commission, or planning zoning commission in Hartford.
How do you keep track of 100 days?
Robin, how would you keep?
So I've been told, and I don't know this, but, they have to pay hotel occupancy tax in the state of Connecticut now. So they're paying it based on the number of days that they rent out. So if you require them to give you their hotel and occupancy payments for the year, it will show you how many days they rented it out.
Keep that on record
Yeah,
or just.
I've never seen it, so, but I've been told that's
just
how they
wondering.
track them.
Right.
Yeah.
But are we talking about just Airbnb or all the various B
I
and
think,
Bs?
I think we're using Airbnb very loosely. It
Yeah.
could be any of the, HomeAway, VRBO, any of those type of listings. They all have to pay the hotel and occupancy tax, so I think it would cover that gamut. I guess if somebody put it up on Craigslist and was kind of doing it, I'll say under.
would be a little scary.
Undercover, but there are some on
We had-
Craigslist. We actually found some.
We had someone doing that on Alcima Drive when I first started here.
Yeah.
He was a tenant subletting rooms in a house. So yes, people are doing things like that. In this case, he was evicting the tenants after they moved in, and the police were involved.
So I think that's an extreme example, and I think
But
that's few
it's
and far
people-
between, but
you leave the
people
door
do do
open,
it.
people will
Yeah,
do it.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't want the situation where people were buying properties, and I don't think you have that much of a demand in Simsbury, but I would not want an Airbnb house next to me.
We actually have a couple of properties in
Right.
Simsbury
So I
where they
don't-
were
I
bought
think that-
specific for
I
that.
think that that's just not okay.
Yeah.
So do we regulate it, or, I thought we talked about last time, was it one of our neighboring towns sent out cease and desists or something like that?
No, we did.
Simsbury, yeah.
Okay, but on other,
They weren't
I know
cease
another
and
town.
desist, they were friendly letters.
Okay, it was.
First time.
We're aware
Yeah.
of the use of this property. Granby did as well.
Oh, okay,
They're aware. They have a lot that are posted and
okay.
so they're aware of.
So I guess the first question, and, we've talked about, it was talked about at the Board of Selectmen level, and we've kind of done some background research just nationally, because obviously there's not a lot locally at the state level, is do you guys want to regulate it via a zoning regulation as a zoning commission, or do you want to make it as an approved use and have it licensed through the Board of Selectmen? Those are your two options. It's done both ways, as a zoning regulation and as an ordinance, a licensing ordinance. There's pros and cons to
Right.
either
Yeah,
of
but more
those.
commonly, it's not regulated at all.
Right.
Nationally, there's a lot of places that regulate it. Statewide, no, there's not.
How about in Massachusetts?
We had some examples actually
did
from
have some,
Tom's
yeah.
work from
Rhode Island.
Massachusetts.
Yep.
We can get, so I apologize, I was going to promise the commission to share the presentation from what legal update. I will email the commission, I just can't find my copy.
Mine's
of it.
at home, so we can scan mine and send it out to you guys from Hot Topics, and that has a lot of information, good information in
Be
there.
helpful.
Gave a
Yeah.
lot of examples and nationwide
Right.
perspective, so
Yeah.
Boulder,
So-
Colorado was one of them, and two communities out of Florida.
Yeah.
So they got community, vacation destination communities,
Right.
along with like the Hartford, Connecticut's, and I can't remember a few other ones.
Yeah, I know.
But, because you brought it up and said you wouldn't want somebody living next to you or buying the house next to you and just having it Airbnb the whole time. As a resident, what would you be comfortable with?
I wouldn't mind, we're just talking about accessory dwelling units. You can almost guarantee that some of those are going to turn into
Correct.
Airbnbs.
Correct.
The
So
owner has to be
limiting it,
there.
But you're, okay.
I mean, it has to be a
Owner-
primary resident. I mean, the owner doesn't necessarily have to be there, but they have to live there, right?
So would you like to see it handled in a way where, just like ADUs, you require an affidavit from the owner saying that they
I live here.
owner occupied property?
I think that would really cut down on a lot of issues.
Sure.
Like the Scully's wrote, they have empty rooms.
Yep.
They live there, though.
Oh, yeah, but they're,
Even if it's over the garage in the back of the lot,
They're there.
I
If something
live
was to
here.
be-
no,
right, if something
that's
was-
not what his letter said. His letter talked about
Okay,
they're away.
but we
So
don't
they
need to
rent
use.
their house while they're
But
away.
we don't
Kids are
need to use
away.
specific people, as we can just,
they block out times.
No, I thought he said his kids are out of the house.
They are,
Yeah.
yeah.
They're gone.
So
He's got empty,
He has empty spots.
the house is empty when he and his wife are gone. Instead of leaving the house empty, he Airbnbs
But they still
it.
live there, so they're gonna have a vested interest in keeping the property up and manageable, and
absolutely.
they have their neighbors still,
I think that that's.
they have to answer to, and
So, just food for thought, once again, is this something that the commission wants to regulate, or you want to say it's an as-of-right activity, similar how what we discussed with, well, we're not committing to the ADU approach, but say that maybe by site plan approval, the operation of a short-term residential rental unit would be allowed, and one of the requirements is an affidavit that the property's owner occupied. I'm just thinking out loud, we could draft something for you, or we can share everything and then talk about this in 2 weeks.
Well, you can talk about, I think, I'm sorry, Ken.
Go ahead.
Having the owner occupied thing is sort of a hope that that'll guarantee that the owner will take care of it, and they won't disturb the neighbors because their neighbors are their neighbors. But what about these cases where you exchange houses with somebody in Europe? I know people that say, okay, I'll take your place in London and you take my place in Simsbury for a month. Are we going to try to regulate those guys?
But again, the owners are gonna come back to their house.
Well,
Still owner occupied, unless they're
I
gone
know.
for 12 months a year.
Right.
Yeah, but if they're going to have to go and they might be gone for a year, who knows?
but
So the comment would be, is how we define short-term
Yeah.
residential units. So we could say less than 30 days. So your example that, let's say you're exchanging with, I live in Spain, you're here in Simsbury, and you say to me, I'm going to Spain for 45 days. Can you want to come to America? Sure, I'll stay. We'll swap houses for 45 days. Well, we wouldn't qualify under that reg if you define it by less than 30 days.
Well, there's no money changing hands anyway.
Right, but just the activity of the
How
reg.
does
I
it
mean-
tax
Oh,
it?
Well, in
Yeah,
that case, you wouldn't be paying the hotel and occupancy
Yeah.
tax, which could be
Okay,
another
that's
criteria.
an answer to it. I
put in
just-
there.
we could write that up for you,
Yeah.
like narrowly define what a short-term residential unit is.
And how does that compare to our regs which permit up to 5 unrelated people living in a house?
The definition of family. I'll defer to the zoning officer first.
Well, I mean, this is a commercial use. I don't think you can compare someone living as a single housekeeping unit, a family unit, up to 5 unrelated, to I'm renting my house out for Old Farms, $850 a night is obviously a commercial enterprise, which is qualifying under the hotel and occupancy tax that's being collected for it. Those are very distinguishable. I will say that your definition of family contradicts other regs that we're going to have to
I do
discuss.
think we should look at that. I was reading that today.
It's highlighted for a
Yep.
reason, because we have issues in town that I can't move forward on violations for that really need to be because of our conflicts between certain definitions, and it starts with that.
So going forward,
family.
that could be more clear.
Yeah, but it's definitely distinguishable from short-term rentals. I mean, those two wouldn't even come into play. I don't think that would be a question.
How would the licensing work?
So what we could do is we could give you a breakdown of like, okay, a reg would look like this, and this is what the licensing, because the licensing is the more popular route, so we have a bunch of examples for that we could bring in and show you guys, and it's really up to you how you want to do it either way. I don't know that one is better than the other. The only advantage to licensing is it takes the appealability of my decisions
Yep.
out of it.
Yep.
It's licensed through, Board of Selectmen, if that's who chooses to do the licensing, and it would have its own appeals process, which would take it out of the realm of me, which goes to ZBA and then the court. So that's maybe the only advantage or difference, real significant difference
And
of
what if we
it.
have the licensing go through you?
Well, some of them
So there
do.
is no-
Actually, we've seen some of the ordinances where it does, and there's a different process in place, because it's not being done under my authority as a zoning officer, under the zoning regulations, it's a different process. It would go back to whatever board, and, Board of Selectmen isn't something that's kind of a universal term across the nation, so there's different boards. But essentially, I would think an appeal of whatever decision would go back to the Board of Selectmen under an ordinance.
Is there a cost for the licensing?
Potentially.
Potentially, nothing,
I mean,
we could, what we could do is provide the examples from other communities, and if they mention what their fees, I can't remember offhand.
I think
one that
some
jumped out at me.
do, but
And is it a one flat thing, or is it by the night or
Well, the
usage?
So there's actually different approaches on that.
Yeah,
Some,
it's really varied. What we'll do is, Tom, the intern for the town manager's office, has done actually some really good research into kind of different areas across the nation that have done it that he shared with us, and we can certainly make copies of those and give them to you guys, just to kind of see the different approaches that are being used. I don't,
Really helpful.
they're larger than us, so like when we looked through, we were like, oh, a lot of this stuff would not be
apply.
doable here, but there's some kind of, bones to it that you could
That we
pull
could
out
work
and
with.
kind of
right.
use.
I mean,
Yeah.
because this thing's so new, that's what we're struggling
Yeah.
with. We're trying to find, the people who are reacting to it now are like the Savannah, Georgias of the world, the Boulder, Colorados, the
Austin,
Clearwater,
Texas.
Florida,
Yeah.
where they're experiencing an influx of tourists.
Right.
So we're kind of caught where, I don't have an easy example to point to in Connecticut to a similar community and go, hey, this is how they're handling it here.
Right.
So-
Because we're not as tourist-driven as some of these other
So
spots.
you may see, as Robin said, some of them get really elaborate
Yeah.
in how
Yeah.
they handle these, but
That makes sense, they have to.
Okay,
Good information.
that's
You ready?
12 minutes.
All right.
We're ready.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Okay, Donna is.
Second by Donna. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And the
Good,
next
thank you.
meeting is 2 weeks from tonight.
2 weeks from tonight.